Hi, welcome back to the iHeartMess YouTube channel, your faithful guide to the best of the worst celebrity fashion. I'm Emily Kirkpatrick, a professional fashion writer and a connoisseur in all things déclassé. Today I'm coming to you with an extra special edition of these recaps, taking a look at the 2025 Oscars red carpet. We're going to be talking about the biggest trends I saw on Hollywood's biggest night, my picks for best dressed, and the profound influence my coverage has had on the fashions at that award show's after parties. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get into it. To begin with, famous men are going absolutely apeshit for brooches this award season. It is eye-wateringly expensive lapel pins as far as the eye can see. This montage is just a small sampling of the myriad famous men who attended the Oscars with some multi-carat bauble pinned to their collar. Of course, real male fashion plates like Coleman Domingo have been sporting this styling hack for a minute now, but this year it seems everyone has finally caught on to the beauty of a little bauble. And of course, by everyone, I mean every major jewelry brand that loans out these diamonds to celebrities. Those guys have been working on finding ways to squeeze more bejeweled accessories into tuxedos for years now. So this newfound popularity of the brooch has been a massive revelation within the industry. Personally, I think this is just the tip of the blinged out iceberg. In my newsletter, I've been suggesting that some famous man needs to get all of his shirt buttons made out of chunky gemstones. I mean, at the very least, where have all the multi-million-dollar cufflinks gone? Out of all the brooches that night, though, the biggest belonged to Best Actor winner Adrien Brody, who wore a massive winged diamond and emerald piece by Elsa Jin. And now that I brought up Adrien, I just have to mention that being a Best Actor winner in a gigantic diamond brooch does not mean you get to chuck your used gum at your girlfriend's head in front of your colleagues in an audience of 18 million. Just swallow it. In addition to this brooch barrage, I was delighted to see that a handful of young men are waking up to the boundless accessorizing potential of fun neckwear. Doing something even minorly alternative with your bow tie is an instant way to jazz up even the most boring tuxedo. I first started thinking about this because of the many fabulous little ribbons Maddie Matheson has been wearing throughout award show season in place of traditional ties, and then this thought was only compounded when I saw Woody Harrelson's Grateful Dead autographed tie-dye tie. At the Oscars, Omar Apollo wore a Valentino suit with a gorgeous scarf knotted around the neck in place of a tie, a very similar look to the Ultra Boys Prep School uniform Drew Starkey wore to the SAG Awards a couple of weeks ago. I think Omar looks great, and I like that he paired this with the brand's ballet flats, but I think he went a little overboard with the accessorizing. I feel like the scarf tie is already such a statement piece in and of itself that you've got to choose between the pin and the veil. Coco Chanel wasn't right about many things, but she really ate with the whole take one piece off before you leave the house thing. Lakeith Stanfield demonstrated just how simple it can be. No need to reinvent the wheel, just add a touch of ruffle to your cravat and you've got an entirely fresh silhouette. And Honora's Mark Eidelstein had an exceptional after-party look in this Loewe suit with a long, slightly ruffled feather in place of a necktie. This feather across the torso can't help but remind me of Hunter Schafer's similarly plumed and stunning Anne Dummelmeister after-party look from a couple years back. And much like Lakeith's neckerchief, Mark's tie swap is simple yet incredibly impactful, a breakout look for a breakout star of the night. We've now reached that point in the video where it's time for me to toot my own horn a little bit, because there was once again an array of Oscars attire that was extremely mess-coded, closely adhering to everything I've ever said and recommended in my work. The first and most obvious being Julia Fox pulling a full Lady Godiva. The Uncut Gems muse attended the Vanity Fair Oscars after party in a completely sheer Delara Findicolu dress that was not all that dissimilar from the Yeezy Couture mini Bianca Censori wore to the Grammys, except Julia's featured some strategic hair extension application to keep her full labia from hanging out there. That appears to be all that was keeping this look from going XXX. As I told you last month, Pandora's box, in every sense of that word, has been irrevocably opened. Doja Cat also arrived serving full frontal nudity, but hers was thankfully trompe-l'oeil. The pop star wore a custom balmain gown covered in sequins expertly matched to her skin tone and its various folds and indentations to create the illusion that we are seeing everything going on underneath. I tried desperately to find a photo of this thing from the back to see if they had embellished a butt crack to match, but sadly to no avail. However, that is how I discovered the monster pair of pleaser platform mules they put Doja in order to wear this dress. A personal pet peeve of mine we will be discussing at length in my forthcoming February recap video. Also, because it is my want to nitpick, while I think this dress is great, especially by Balmain standards, I would have loved if they made all the fringe at the bottom look more like flames. Now, something that I'm always curious about and obsessed with interrogating is where we as a society decide to draw the line of indecency and outrage on a daily basis. Because something like Bianca Censori, and to an even lesser extent Julia Fox, can inspire mass shock and indignation, yet Olivia Wilde shows up in a sheer Chloe brief and boho dressing gown and I don't hear a peep. I just think it's always interesting and noteworthy to acknowledge how wildly the Overton window of modesty has shifted over the last couple of years. And on the topic of things that become radically normalized incredibly quickly, Megan Thee Stallion attended the same after party in a Poison Ivy inspired gown with a set of matching couture pasties. I like this gown, it feels very Saint Laurent to me, although personally I feel we've moved far beyond the need for pasties at this point. If they must be included, I think they should be much wilder and more conceptual. Give me a nipple covering made out of shells or loose change. Even a teeny tiny feather in homage to Hunter, as mentioned earlier, could have been really fab. And I think Meg could have really taken this look to the next level of couture if she would have ditched this halter neckline altogether and just let the girls hang uncensored. And finally, almost a full year after I articulated the trend in the pages of New York Magazine, crack came roaring back in a major way on the Vanity Fair red carpet. Zoe Kravitz wore an Yves Saint Laurent spring 1996 haute couture gown that featured a big old sheer panel across the buttocks. An incredible piece of fashion history, although I'm still waiting patiently for someone famous out there to realize the inherent power in a well-placed crystal tramp stamp a la Christina Aguilera in the Come On Over Baby music video. And Julian Huff took this trend to a very uncanny valley place, fully triggering my automatonophobia in this Schiaparelli dress with a dramatic plunging back. A rear silhouette that one would think would leave ample crack exposed, but that actually completely covers up the intergluteal cleft with this flesh tone fabric. Kind of an eerie sartorial response to the rise of humanoids we're seeing this year, both in cinema and via Kim Kardashian's Tesla SpawnCon. One of the biggest trends of the night, and of this month, as we will be discussing more in depth in my February fashion recap video, is huge abstract shapes. While the Build-A-Body era of fashion was all about taking the female body and exaggerating its curves to cartoonish proportions, the look now is all about eschewing the body entirely in favor of big geometric chunks and abstract silhouette-altering adornments. I think the most clear example of this was Sarah Paulson in a Marc Jacobs Spring 2025 cocktail dress featuring large plush appliques. I can't really explain it, but this feels to me like the type of clothing Pokemon's Geodude would make if he got accepted to Parsons. It's very Comme des Garçons lumps and bumps collection adjacent, playing with the current trend of artificially extending the body, but in a way that's comforting and neoplastic with these tumor-like bulges, as opposed to harkening back to some caged Victorian glamour of yesteryear. Lena Mafouf in Ashley Studio was another great example of this current fashion movement, in a dress featuring a large calligraphy-esque swoop of a bass clef emerging out of her bust line. This dress immediately reminded me of one of my favorite looks from last year's Vanity Fair after party, which was Andrea Riseborough's custom Jeremy Scott mini dress, which I compared at the time to a Roy Lichtenstein illustration of a brushstroke. And as it turns out, Andrea and Jeremy were light years ahead of the fashion curve. But the way you know that this aesthetic is really taking hold in Hollywood right now is that even traditionally safe dressers like Zoe Deutsch dabbled in something a little more oddly three-dimensional this year, wearing a butter yellow Tamara Ralph gown bedecked in oversized pom-poms. And in this same vein of brand new shapes hitting the red carpet, I just need to ask, what the hell is going on with Louis Vuitton's four-leaf clover skirts? Perhaps you'll recall that the brand's creative director Nicolas Ghesquier first inflicted this thick, wired hem on Emma Stone, dressing her in a one-shouldered orange sherbet gown that was largely derided as a bad 80s prom dress. And now he's giving us yet another very stark take on this structural element at the Oscars, thanks to French actress Stacey Martin, who looked like she was wearing a Van Cleef & Arpels branded cookie cutter as a skirt. This was followed up by a slightly softened iteration on this chunky, rigid hem on two of the Haim sisters. There's something about the fat, wired border juxtaposed against the free-flowing satin fabric that will never sit quite right with my spirit, but I remain open to any and all new forms that offer to liberate us from the current red carpet tyranny of corsets and hoop skirts. Readers of my newsletter know all too well that Ariana Grande and I have been locked in a serious dispute throughout the entirety of her Wicked promotional tour, and that disagreement is rooted in the fact that her stylist insists on dressing her exclusively in the most wan, washed-out shades of light pink I've ever seen in my life. And the Oscars were certainly no exception. Ariana wore a Schiaparelli Spring 2025 couture gown featuring a clam-inspired undulating structural peplum with a sparkling full tulle skirt. The brand slightly altered the color of the gown for Ari from more of a nudie beige to this light shade of blush. But once again, while the dress is fab, the pastel palette is not it. I promise you, if she would just go a couple of shades darker with it, all of these fashions would suddenly really pop. Because that's the other thing that distresses me so much about this situation, is I really like most of these dresses. I think they're largely quite beautiful, save for the hue that robs Ariana of all of her life force. And I think nothing proves my point better than the Schiaparelli dress she changed into immediately after this for her performance of Somewhere Over the Rainbow to open the Oscars ceremony. Because just like that, Ari went from convalescent to vibrant. I love this second gown and wish she had worn it on the red carpet instead. This crimson sequin-covered look asks the question, what if Dorothy's iconic ruby slippers were actually a dress complete with a 4-inch heel sticking out of the back? A bewitching trompe-l'oeil moment befitting this magical film. We also just saw this same dynamic play out when Ariana went to the SAG Awards in another anemic pink custom Loewe gown, only to look 1,000% healthier and more alive the very next day, wearing a black and hot pink vintage Yves Saint Laurent gown formerly worn by Catherine Deneuve. I am simply begging Ari to go get her color analysis done. Now, Cynthia Erivo, on the other hand, I think has done an excellent job of staying true to the core DNA of Elphaba's aesthetic without so narrowly sticking to emerald green. That said, when I first saw her custom Louis Vuitton gown for the evening, I did not like it. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I'm ready to move on from this big skirted pannier silhouette for good. But as time has gone on, the look has grown on me immensely. This almost black-green velvet is incredibly regal and elegant, and while the collar is deeply Count Von Count, it also strikes the appropriately supernatural chord. And it seems Cynthia wasn't the only one feeling the Transylvania vibes on Oscars night, because Laverne Cox also showed up at the Vanity Fair after party in a bat collar all her own, wearing a Terry Mugler spring 1997 gown. The styling is a little Elvira for my liking, and I'm going to get into my beef with the gloves in a minute, but otherwise I'm just relieved to see that they finally opened up those Mugler archives to anyone other than the Kardashians. And since we had that chat about flagrant celebrity SpawnCon last month, I wanted to share with you the latest in laughable PR stunts I stumbled across, which is Nikki Hilton Rothschild's custom Judith Lieber Peroni clutch. First of all, this woman is a Rothschild and a Hilton. Why is she even doing ads to begin with? But I will say to her credit, at least she bothered to mark it on her Instagram stories as a hashtag ad, which is much more than I can say about most of her A-list peers when put in the same situation. But what exactly is it about Nikki that Peroni thinks is such a good spokesperson for their beer? She's not exactly the poster girl for swilling brewskis. In fact, I could not find a single photo of her even pretending to take a sip from this bottle as part of her contractual agreement. The closest she got was awkwardly holding an open bottle somewhere in the vicinity of her face while getting glammed. I was also a little disappointed in the execution of this gimmick, as I think there could have been a lot more fun posing and sight gags done with such a weirdly elaborate crystallized prop. But that said, I thoroughly appreciate the level of investment from the brand that went into creating this very silly photo op. Butterfinger and Saint Laurent, please take note. I don't really know what to make of this trend as of yet, but I just noticed it during my Getty Images deep dive, so I figured I'd bring it to everyone's attention. And that is the fact that there were a handful of women laced up like a pair of sneakers at the Vanity Fair after party. Sofia Vergara wore a powder blue Celia Crithariotti gown featuring corset-style crisscross lacing from the bust line to the ankle, creating the optical illusion that you're seeing her real flesh underneath. Camila Cabello wore a mustard yellow Alexis Mobile dress featuring the same strung-up detailing across the bust, making it appear as though the front panels of her gown were left wide open, and YouTube star Emma Chamberlain attended in a sort of Dr. Finkelstein-inspired Jean-Paul Gaultier Spring 2025 couture gown designed by Ludovic de Saint-Cernin, featuring spiral lacing going along the hip bone down to the hem, leaving just a thin strip of leather protecting Emma's modesty. The silhouette actually reminded me of the burgeoning loincloth trend I brought to your attention back in November, and it got my hopes up that maybe this caveman-approved style isn't quite dead yet. Okay, and now we need to have a real frank conversation about what is going on with the new Valentino for a second. Because listen, I love Valentino. I love Alessandro Michele. I love what Alessandro Michele did at Gucci. But you cannot tell me that what he's doing right now as the creative director of Valentino is not essentially a copy and paste job. It's too bad, because I was excited to see how Michele would stretch himself and adapt his unique signature style to this new brand. And instead, we've just seen more of the same. I can see the Valentino house codes he's worked in there. I get the 60s and 70s references he's making to Valentino Garavani's original designs. But at the same time, pop a bowl cut and an 80s oversized eyeglass frame on these girls, and it's Gucci all over again. As I I think both Charlotte Lawrence and Harry Neff's Oscar gowns prove, the brand can't seem to move beyond this singular aesthetic when it comes to red carpet glamour. And again, this kitschy cat clutch absolutely screams Gucci to me. On a completely unrelated note, what is going on with all these crystal mesh dresses suddenly? There were a whole lot of rhinestone-studded gowns on Oscars night with wildly varying levels of success. Selena Gomez's custom baby pink Ralph Lauren gown I thought was one of the rarer bedazzled triumphs of the evening, whereas most wound up more like Rachel Sennett's hot pink Balenciaga couture column gown, a dress that looks like it is 100% available for purchase on Pretty Little Thing right now. And this is just to say that we have got to let the opera glove thing go. It is simply not a cool or interesting styling choice, especially if it's being used in an attempt to salvage an otherwise boring look, as Paris Hilton is doing here. And in Zoe Saldana's case, I just think this Saint Laurent gown would look so much better without them. This trend started around 2020 before really peaking in 2022, so by now it just feels played out. Honestly, I also think Zoe's dress would look a million times better if they hadn't lined the bust and left that crystal mesh portion sheer. I know the Oscars is still super conservative when it comes to its fashion, and a bare nipple at that ceremony is considered sacrilegious, but it's what the dress demands, and it would have helped visually balance out the volume of the skirt. Plus, how badass would it have been to free the nipple while picking up a Best Supporting Actress statuette? We're going to wrap things up here today with my short list of the best dressed stars of the evening, starting with Molly O'Brien. Molly's not technically a star, I suppose, but she did win an Oscar for Best Documentary Short Film. I was immediately taken with the perfect amount of cleavage she's showing and her oversized glasses, which I now want for myself. And then I noticed that the shoulders of her Alexander McQueen gown are covered in ornately beaded and embroidered beetles. Stunning, unusual, and perfectly executed, this is a masterclass in original Oscars dressing that celebrities should be studying closely. My other favorite look of the night was June Squibb, or should I say Bill Skarsgård.
I'm actually being played by Bill Skarsgård right now.
She may be only 2 years younger than the ceremony itself, but she wildly outdressed every young starlet in attendance. And finally, I have to praise Adam Sandler for always staying true to himself and his personal style, no matter what peer pressure he may face. Oscars fashion can be a little stodgy, and this was exactly the breath of fresh air that ceremony needed. I've always said I would rather see a celebrity's authentic, sartorial self-expression, even if it's a huge swing and a miss, rather than the same cookie-cutter, stylist-sanctioned chic outfit. So if the Sandman wants to show up to the most prestigious black tie event of the year, dressed ready to play one-on-one basketball, I'm all for it. Okay, that's every single thought I had about the 2025 Academy Awards red carpet and its aftermath. I'll be back imminently with your usual recap of my favorite bad outfits from the month of February. If you liked or loathed the things you saw here today, please like, subscribe, and badger every person you know into watching me as well. You can also sign up for my weekly Substack newsletter at iheartmess.com. The link will be in the caption below. I'll see you all again real soon with some more bad stuff. Bye!